Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee, Books, and Rain. I'm Rachel. With me is coffee and books and my reviews, as well as no rain, but I was going to say maybe with rain, but that would have been a lie. And I don't feel like lying to you guys today. So, no rain, but that's all right. I think we may have some in the forecast for this week. I'm hoping because I would love the fall weather to roll in. It got hot again and it was like in the 90s, upper 80s, and so I'm ready for the fall weather where this plaid flannel shirt will actually be relevant. But let's dive into the book of the moment, and it is Hollow by Taylor Grothe. And so this book was a very interesting read, and I've got lots of thoughts. So we shall see if it coordinates with the other people who have also read this book. So, Don't Let the Forest In meets The Whispering Dark in a queer YA cult horror following a recently diagnosed autistic teen who becomes enmeshed in a community of outcasts harboring a sinister secret. One of the best horror novels of the year, full stop. Haunting, heartfelt, and downright creepy. Camilla Cole, best author of So Let Them Burn. So, after a meltdown in her school cafeteria prompts an unwanted autism diagnosis, Cassie Davis moves back to her hometown in upstate New York, where her mom hopes the familiarity will allow Cassie to feel normal again. Cassie's never truly felt normal anywhere, but she does crave the ease she used to feel or used to have with her old friends. Problem is that her friends aren't so eager to welcome her back into the fold. They extend an olive branch by inviting her on their backpacking trip to Hollow Ridge, in the upper reaches of the Adirondacks. But when a fight breaks out on their first night, Cassie wakes to a barren campsite, her friends all gone. With severe weather approaching and near sensory overload, Cassie is saved by a boy named Caleb, who whisks her away to a compound of artists and outcasts he calls the Roost. As Caleb tends to her injuries, Cassie begins to feel, for the first time in her life, that she can truly be herself. But as the days pass, strange happenings around the Roost makes Cassie question her instincts. Noises in the trees grow louder, begging the question, are the dangers in the forest, on the trail, or in the Roost itself? In a world where an autistic character rarely gets to be the hero of their own story, Cassie Davis's one step back, two steps forward journey to unmasking makes Hollow as much a love letter to neurodivergency as it is a haunting tale you'll want to read with the lights on. So it is considered young adult, horror, queer, fantasy, and disability and autistic spectrum disorder. So those are just a couple of the genres that it seems to touch upon. It is approximately 350 pages in hardcover and is expected publication of September 30th, 2025. So from there, let us scroll down and boop, 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 there we go. So now this is not the first book, I guess this month, that I have read with an autistic main character. And the other one that I know off the top of my head is actually You Aren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. So both of those are really good and both have very horrific elements. But I do think from having a group of friends that are either on the spectrum or, adjacent, because I think there's the ADHD, where you're autistic and ADHD. That's at least what they've referred, like some of them have referred to themselves as. I do see some of the mannerisms in the character that's presented here. I also feel as though many of the people who have left reviews have really appreciated being seen by this book in the ways that they feel seen. And so I think that's really well done as well. Now, in You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White, the main character is chosen nonverbal, and they're also trans identifying. So this book does not have at least the trans identifying character, but there is a love interest that is two females as well. So all in all, I liked the book in its contents and its representation. So I do try to pick up those kind of books pretty frequently. I think it is fantastic to have the conversations that they inspire, as well as just being able to highlight books with that diversity in them. So from Sadie Hartman, who is an author, she thought that this was really wickedly creepy. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight that because I know I've heard of Sadie Hartman, and so just seeing that her comment was kind of pinned towards the top was pretty encouraging to see. Now, Cassie comes back to her hometown, and the very first thing we see is that she's walking into a donuts shop she used to go to with her friends. Now, it's been about 4 years since she has been away. And during that time, like when she left, she didn't contact anyone. So she up and left and went to New York City. Well, now she's back. And she's kind of having to face the idea that she didn't reach out to any of her friends after she left. And I think there's a couple comments where they may have tried to reach out to her, but she was not in the mental headspace to be able to reach back out in return, which is understandable. And I know that can be kind of fairly common if you are in part of the autism spectrum disorder category or in that disability. So it's not that the person doesn't care. The person just kind of goes through this sense of almost like isolation, and it's not that it's not important. It is simply that they are unable to kind of act upon it, and I think other people could potentially describe it a little bit better. I'm just trying to explain it from the way when I've talked to my friends about how things feel for them, I try to get a better understanding of, kind of what they think, what they go through, and how their mind kind of processes those sorts of activities. And so it's not that that person does not care. It's that person is almost overwhelmed of, what if the person on the other side doesn't want to talk to me? What if they're just being nice? What if? And it almost causes that person to shut down a little bit by being unable. And then if a certain amount of time passes, then they feel as though perhaps it's too late to try to do anything about it. Well, now she's back. Cassie's back. And she is seeing these friends that were some of her very best friends and potential love interests. And so the summary says that they don't seem to want her back, but they invite her anyway. Well, it seems as though, like, within only a week amount of time, they're pretty amenable to having a conversation to just, find out what happened, and then to maybe put the past behind them. Well, Cassie is she's unable to kind of, I don't want to say not forgive herself, but a little bit. And she feels that distance, I think, more acutely than the others perhaps did. The others feel perhaps hurt, perhaps frustrated, perhaps just don't understand. And she's having a hard time verbalizing like her side of it to help them understand. So it really is a very big miscommunication in a lot of ways, because she's really unable to communicate how she's feeling, and they're really not asking in a way that she feels comfortable answering. It's a little difficult to describe. Anyway, going deeper into the story, they go on a camping trip. I think it's 4 of them, and she was invited by a guy named Blake, who I think was one of her really good friends growing up, of course, and as the group seems to have been fairly close in general. And so they make the decision that, well, he invited her, so she'll share the tent with him. Well, I think he was already having a little bit of a budding romance with someone, and that person thought, well, maybe she should share the tent with Blake, and maybe Cassie should share with one of the others. But apparently they drink a little too much, and Cassie doesn't really remember, but apparently kind of blacks out and wakes up the next morning only kind of vaguely remembering what really happened the night before. Now, the summary again makes it sound like nobody's there when she wakes up. Like, it's just like completely like everybody's left. She's there. But Blake is there, and he said, well, the others left after the fight. They left. And so she gets really upset, and her feelings get hurt and things of that nature, because she doesn't really know how the fight went down or what really was said for things to snowball so dramatically. Now, I know that the friend group wanted to talk about kind of like her leaving and her not connecting with anyone while she was gone, but unless they actually were not interested in kind of hearing her side of the story, I'm not, like, I don't know how things went so far downhill. Like, from that point, you're like, I'm really like, man, what was said that was so bad? Like, really? But, and then the story, like, a big thunderstorm comes through, everyone kind of gets separated, and Cassie gets found by this guy named Caleb. Now, one of the biggest things for me was that, yes, she gets brought in by Caleb, and she's got a really bad sprain, if not potentially broken ankle, and she is not freaking out about being in this place with these strangers. She seemed more uncomfortable with her friends than with this group of strangers that she's never met in this like community that no one has ever mentioned being hidden in the woods before. So I was a little baffled by Cassie's just acceptance of being in this spot, and I guess not wanting to reach out to her mom. I mean, her mom told her to, like, be careful, take care of yourself, that sort of thing. And she did kind of have a little bit of blow up at her mom, just saying, hey, I need to go do this. I need to spend some time with my friends. I'm trying to have a normal life. And her mom was like, well, I just want you to be careful. I want you to be okay. And I mean, I get that. But yes, Cassie does, to feel normal, need to be able to make a couple of decisions for herself, especially, if she wants to try to live, I guess, a more, like, normal-esque life. And I say that with the idea that Cassie wants to try to find a place where she belongs. And so that's what she's trying to do, is she thinks that, well, maybe I can fit back in with this friend group. I just need to give myself that ability to open up and be present for it. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm like, I think there were a lot of moments that do come across as like being very like emotionally charged. And that's another reason I like this book. Now, some of the horror-esque aspects really start coming into play with the fact that you're in the woods in this hidden community. There's like crows and ravens like all about. They're having a hard time finding Cassie's friends, and something just seems off. Even from the very beginning, something seems off. And so that's another reason that I don't know if this offness came across to Cassie as, hey, well, everything's already strange. Me being strange is like, me being like different, or, having my disability seems to fit in well here. And so if she was feeling that level of acceptance, then, I mean, good for her. But potentially we don't know what might happen hanging out with these people in the woods. Will she ever see her mom again? Will she ever see these friends again? Great question. But I think that's what kept me reading to the end of this book. It is very creepy and has some really spooky moments. So I thought this was wonderfully done by sorry, by Taylor Grothe for the not only the representation of an autism spectrum disorder, but someone who is also going through kind of this fairly terrifying moment. So I was sorry, I had a little dry spot in my throat, but I was captivated. I really thought this book was very interesting, and I think you could even read the reviews if you go on Goodreads and just like see how many 5-star ratings this book has. Now, it's not perfectly 5-star, but I see 63% of the reviews are 5 stars. So I do feel as though many people who are neurodivergent, who fall on this spectrum, feel seen in some way or represented in some way by the character in this book. So I think that's pretty cool. But with all of that being said, I do think I'm going to leave it here. If you have not liked and subscribed, I hope you'll think about it. But I will see you all on the next page. I hope you have a great one.